Welcome to the Josh Huisman Podcast.
The year was 1990. It was on the south side. Well, actually, this would have been the west side of Chicago in a town out in, you know what's funny? I think it was Naperville or Wheaton, Illinois.
That is
it's
the town.
Wheaton College, where I was standing out with my family, and it was a freezing January night, and we were about to go see this band called Whiteheart on the Powerhouse tour. And I remember that it was the first night of the tour, and the band was still finishing up sound check inside, and it was running a little late, and I was freezing, and I remember thinking, this better be worth it. 'Cause I was in 8th grade at this point, and I will tell you what, when I went in there and the band Whiteheart kicked into that opening song called Independence Day, I have been hooked to Christian music, but then also music in general from that point on. And the guy who I have on this show right now, his name is Florian. He's the lead singer of that group who came out there, and you know, it's well known that you were pretty good at backflips. And you did I think you did a backflip pretty much towards the beginning of the show. And I remember thinking, never in my life will I be able to do a backflip. And so, you know what? You had me. And it became that tape, Powerhouse, became one of my favorites. And through all of time, have just been a fan of the band ever since. So today I have Florian here on the show with me. And how are you doing, my friend?
Dandy. No, I'm fine. I'm good.
Yeah.
Just hanging.
Well, I'm so glad that you came on here and are willing to talk with me for a little bit. I've promised you before the show started that I'm not going to fanboy out as much as I may want to at certain points, because it may weird you out how much I know about some of the songs in your band and the things that you have done. But I really am looking forward to having a conversation with you, because Whiteheart, ended back in 1997, I believe it was. It's been
6, 7, something like that.
It's been many years, and you have probably had a lot of things going on in your life and in your world since that time. And I think it'd be a great opportunity to bring the listeners up to what God's been doing in your life since then. It's been pretty well documented. At least I have heard quite a few times how you became the lead singer of the band Whiteheart, and the things you're involved of, and hearing stories of you dancing off on the side of the stage and singing along to the songs.
Yes.
Is there anything in that you think, well, I've never really talked about what that was like to become the lead singer of that group?
Well, I mean, in certain ways, I've talked about it a fair amount, because getting there was, number one, not anything I thought I'd ever do. I'm a farm boy from Indiana, lived out in boonies in northern Indiana, and we just had a little mini farm, and all the big ones were all around us. And, so I didn't do, we sang in a little country church choir, my mom and dad and sister and brother and I, but, in churches that would have maybe 100 people, sometimes a little less or more. And sang in choir in high school. And when it was really cool, we sang in swing choir. That's where you actually got to dance with the girls, so that's why I like that part. And I actually sang. There was a Northern Indiana put together a boys choir in junior high, and I sang in that. And then they picked 13 of us to sing in a little ensemble for the South Bend Symphony Orchestra, and I got to do that. So there was a few little things that I got to do, and it just I thought it was fun, but I never listened to music. Our family, it wasn't like music wasn't a part of our lives, but it kind of wasn't. We didn't turn on the radio when we got in the car. Usually at Christmas, we'd listen to Mitch Miller and the Gang, which will mean nothing to you guys, but go back and listen. It's odd when I think of it now. Or Mormon Tabernacle Choir. It's just we weren't listening to anything contemporary, either in the church or in secular music. Knew about it happening, but it just wasn't a thing until a buddy of mine in high school, my best friend David Fenstemacher. Hey, Dave, if you get to hear it, we went to his room once and he put a Dan Fogelberg album, Netherlands, on his record player, and it was just like nothing I've ever heard. The melodic nature, the beauty of the music was still to this day, it's one of my favorite solo albums of all time. And the lyrics that he crafted with the beauty of the music, it was just mind-blowing. It wasn't very, what we nowadays call, or back in my music days, called accessible. Didn't get a lot of airplay on radio. I didn't care because I wasn't listening to the radio. I just heard something I loved. And the next album that I heard was Larry Norman, Only Visiting This Planet. He was one of the Jesus movement dudes that got converted to Christianity when they were playing secular music that they had written, same like Phil Kagi, and some of these other guys. And Glenn Kaiser out of Res Band, out of Chicago, that was, he's still an amazing human being at this time. But I just started listening to all kinds of stuff, and one thing led to another. I went to Taylor University, started listening to music more. Buddy of mine, he became a buddy, Jeff Moore, was a year ahead of me at Taylor, and he heard me sing a duet with a guy on campus. He goes, sing background vocals on this little band we put together. So I did that, and one thing led to another. After I graduated with a biology degree, before I was thinking of doing marine biology. My parents helped pay for a lot of school. I said, do you care if I just mess around in Nashville for a year before I go to grad school? And they're like, okay. And so one thing led to another. Through Jeff was going to be opening for Whiteheart in the fall of '85, and I got to be on the road crew for them. And so I'm setting up front truss of lights, guitars, keyboard rigs and stuff, and didn't know how to do that, but you learn. And a lot of times they would be what they call tuning the room before sound check. So they'd put on some white noise or pink noise and kind of EQ the room. And then when they thought he's had it, and very few people are in the room at that time. And he used to put on, back in that day, it was it Corey Hart? It was Every Time You Go Away. It was a pop ballad in mainstream music, kind of a top 10 song. And I would go out and if I was done with doing my gig, I would go out and grab the mic and lip sync around stage with it and mess around because I'm very hyper.
So how old are you at this point?
22.
22?
And I heard later at interviews when I was singing with the band that they sometimes, because it's dark out there usually, out in the house, but I'd be on stage and the LD guy, the lighting director, is kind of working his schemes up and doing his thing, so I can't see out there. But some of the band guys would be sitting out there and go, man, if that guy could ever sing, that would be awesome. And one thing led to another where the lead singer had to leave, and that was a story in and of itself. But when they decided they're going to continue, they held auditions. I auditioned with a group of guys in December of '85. Another group of guys a couple weeks later, and then a third group of guys a couple weeks after that. And I'm like, do these guys think that I could actually do something like this? This is crazy. I could sing high, and I could pretty much sing pitch right, not be too sharp or too flat. And over time, I could be comfortable on stage as long as there weren't people out there. That first show I ever did in February of '85 at Wheaton College, there's 1,200, 1,500 people out there. And I thought I was going to spontaneously combust. I was so scared. I've never sang in front of a ton by myself.
Yeah.
And not only it's like, it's all about you. Yeah, it's a band thing, but you're the lead guy. And so everybody's going to follow you. The band guys aren't doing antics or action. And that took months to get comfortable with being like, look at me. Because I didn't want to look at them because I was scared and nervous and, don't know what I'm doing. But I had enough basic giftings that, they didn't know how scared I was for the most part.
Yeah, and that is a heavy thing to think that, hey, I'm going to step into this space where not only was it singing some songs, but singing some challenging songs to be able to sing. So you said I had a high voice, but to me,
it was real high.
And you mentioned we don't need to go into the background of things that were going on in the band that led to that time where they needed a new lead singer. But I would be curious to know, how was that as a young man walking to, because it was a difficult season for the band.
Oh yeah.
And when you walked into this band who needs a new lead singer in a situation where they weren't planning on needing a new lead singer, and then you walk into that space, how was that on an emotional level, dealing with the band and then for yourself?
For them, I believe it was harder than me. I had my hardness was trying to get comfortable with doing this gig. Theirs was heart issues with someone that moving, like, because they almost just folded and just didn't do anymore because it hurt so much. And they didn't know what the crowds were going to be like. Were people going to be like, what was it going to be like coming back after that? And so I realized later, just kind of because I'm still growing up, that how hard that was for them to have to walk into that. And how do you have conversation about, how do you be authentic? How do you authentically have conversation about this, being thoughtful, but being aware? And, Mark has said a bazillion times, because he was the one that usually spoke, in any detail to the audience. But the more open we were about the hardness of it and the hurt and the confusion, and how do you walk out your relationship in the midst of those challenges, the vulnerability allowed people who were in similar situations to talk.
Yeah. Well, one of the songs that came out of that in that first album that you were a part of, that I've heard other guys in the band talk about it, is How Many Times, a song about forgiveness. And, if we were to really go into, when I was talking, I had on the podcast several weeks ago, Michael Tate and Jeff Frankenstein were talking about the differences between Christian music in the 90s, 80s, 90s, being able to sing about socially conscious issues, things that people are going through, where now a lot of the music is much more worship.
Yes.
And doesn't touch on some of those hard things. But How Many Times was a song that, if, like I said, the lyrics, Lord, I've got no more tears to cry. Someone has hurt me, done me wrong. I'm walking wounded. And I think most people who are listening to this right now could say, yeah, they might be going in the midst of something like that right now, or they've been through it before. And I was curious, that's why I asked that question of you. When as a band, then singing that song each night, how did that hit in those early years when you're singing a song about forgiveness like that?
In some ways, I think God was gracious to me in it not hitting me like it would hit them, because I didn't have the same relationship that they had. So because of how I'm wound and how I will, like I said, I'll probably bawl during this chat, because I'm incredibly emotional about stuff that matters. And I know now how hard it was for them. And that song, the cathartic nature of lyrics, just like Michael had been talking about, it's like you work out faith, hurt, confusion in writing lyrics. Not just like performing them, but it's in the work of the crafting of that you're talking with each other. Because there was co-writing. Every once in a while, a song was pretty much written by Mark or somebody else, but a lot of times there was 2 or 3 guys working on it. And you're talking about the phrasing you're coming up with is making sure you're telling the story as best as you can.
Yeah.
And sometimes there's evolution in that story. Sometimes, and Gersh would mention several times how Gloria Gaither was such a great giver to him on learning how to write songs.
Yeah.
And it was like when he was first starting, I say others because I wasn't a primary writer in the band. I had a few ideas that I came up with here and there, but others like Gersh or Gordon or whatever were the song dudes. But it is, you will want to put too much into song, too many ideas. Like, well, that phrase is a song idea. You need to use that in another song. Mm-hmm. And in trying to craft the singular idea in a concise way, and yet you paint pictures with it. You like that you can close your eyes and see, even for yourself, how that individual who would hear that song, and they put their story inside that lyric. Mm-hmm. And when you can do that and be vulnerable, that it people would talk to us after shows because of it. So we found that the more vulnerable you were, the more it would impact people in a general sense. And
well, one of the things I've found too, as a pastor, and I think the same is true for those in ministry in music or an artist who paints or whatever it may be. If you have never gone through something where it's caused you pain or struggle or heartache, it makes it more difficult to relate to people on that level. So once you actually have gone through a moment where you've been kicked, you've been down, you have a different form of empathy that you did not have before. Oh. So when you write or someone writes something how many times, you can't write that unless you've been through. I mean, if I just go back to those lyrics again, I'm walking wounded. Mm-hmm. You know, when I was 18 years old, man, you had life by the horns, and you haven't really. I
never had rough, bullies at school, maybe, that kind of stuff, which is not nothing, because some of that gets horrible. But it is until you start living life and having real big stuff whack you upside the head, you're like, that's where the gospel can meet you, like where it can really get some teeth. Mm-hmm. Where, like, I didn't know this is part of how that can work. What does that mean? Mm-hmm. How can I walk out my faith in this situation? Yeah,
that's so good. And what it makes my mind go to is in the second half of that song, there's a lyric that says, "And you're telling me," talking to God, "you're telling me I should let it go." And the way you sang that in the album, and I always have to remind myself, this is your first time recording an album, the Don't Wait for the Movie. Yeah. That whole album. And you sang it with emotion. There was some grit there. And what it makes my mind go to, so I'm just, every once in a while on this podcast, I like to share what I'm kind of doing in my daily reading scripturally. And I was reading in Mark today, Mark 16, when Jesus has risen from the dead. And the report that the angels are saying, hey, go tell that Jesus has risen. And then it has a little thing that says, and tell Peter. It makes it a point to say, and tell Peter. Well, what had Peter just done? He had just denied Christ. And Peter...
He needs extra help.
But the Bible makes it a point to say, make sure you tell Peter. There's a forgiveness factor there that's already kind of sowing the seeds of saying... Because Peter probably at that point is going, I'm out. Yeah. Like, I've dropped the ball.
I have no... God. We all know kind of Peter-ish kind of guys, that are kind of alpha-y and boisterous. And, I even think of Paul like that. Like, I think there's times where I think, like, when I read, it's like, he'd irritate me sometimes. Yeah. He'd irritate me. It's like... He'd have amazing things to say. It's like, okay, chill out, dude. But I don't, and I literally don't know. But yeah, it is. There's so much. That's why you can read the word over and over again, and every time there's some new avenue of truth or the way it can penetrate your story that is just lovely.
Right, and in that, where I go back to that lyric, and you're telling me I should let it go. Jesus doesn't sing in that song, just so you know. But I think if he were to respond to that, he would go, yeah, that's why I said, and tell Peter. Mm-hmm. That's why I used Paul, who was the worst. Yeah. And then we called him out. God does forgive, and I don't ask you to do anything that I have not done clearly in my word. And, and if I were to go then, so if we went, this would be kind of fun. Let's do a progression of albums here. And I can give you my little 2 cents, and then you could say, here's how
baby,
you're...
come on.
Okay. So then, and maybe you should throw in what your favorite songs, if you have some, because then you go from Don't Wait for the Movie to Emergency Broadcast. And if we're staying in that same world, there's a song on Emergency Broadcast called Montana Sky that I think Gordon wrote. I know Gordon sings it.
Yeah.
And
he was involved in the writing, and that Gersh had the experience. We were out in Montana on a tour, and he was a voracious runner. He's also a voracious reader, but he'd run 7 to 9, 10 miles every time we get off the bus, and he'll go out once to talk to locals. Where do I go? And there had been this, he had climbed a mountain, and I think the rain had passed, so he's seeing that. He's seeing the sun, all of it all at the same time, and it just created this image. He got a lot of his songs from running, and I just love creation myself. And there's so many parts of God that are in creation that we get to enjoy. Some of them I don't even. My favorite thing to probably do for me is to sit in my backyard and try to see birds that come to the feeder and just hang and be and not have agenda, but just to be kind of out where God is. Not that he's not in this room right now, but
it's for you to get in tune with God as opposed to God.
So Gersh did that, and that song came from that. And there was a hard experience in Gordon's family that created some of the lyric of that, where a family member had died, and it was horrendous and hard. And again, those healing things come from working out you gotta freaking be kidding me that this can happen,
right?
There's just...
And for those not familiar with the song, we're talking about a song called Montana Sky, that it really deals with something I call wrestling with the whys of life. Why these extremely painful things happen, not understanding a reason behind it, maybe having a lot of questions for God in all of that. And the song even says, we don't know why, but in a world, the lyric, but in a world that's lost in sadness, is that what the lyric is?
Yes.
There is a light that still remains. And it really, it's a song that you need to go find a quiet place and just sit back and just let it kind of minister to you, because it definitely does that for me.
Well, we want like the answers, like and that's part of our, broken part of humanity is, well, that's like, fix this, God.
Yeah.
I don't want to live in a world where that kind of crud happens. It's like, here's Eden and here's heaven, and this thing in between, once the fall happened, is just a mess.
Yeah.
And most of the time, especially in the United States, we don't even see the worst of the mess.
Yeah.
And so it is, how can I commune with you? I want to commune with you, God, in the midst of this hurt. What does that look like? Well, we don't like communing in hurt because it's lame.
Yeah.
We just hate it, So you don't wallow in it. You look for him in it. Let him be with you, and remembering that, like, if your expectation is all these, like that you're going to be immune from this stuff, no, you need to be ready to commune with him when it happens.
Yeah.
And none of us are always good at it.
Right.
And we don't welcome it, nor really should we. But we shouldn't expect that we're not going to have some major things happen in life that will whack us upside the head. But that's why intimacy with him daily is what gives us at least the opportunity to find hope, peace, joy in the midst of just really crappy stuff.
Right. And there's a scripture we mentioned. Paul writes about God giving us a peace that surpasses understanding. And a lot of times people will read that scripture and think, well, that means that God will give me peace once I understand.
Oh,
But the meaning of that is God gives you peace when you may never understand.
in the midst of all that stuff that we're like the why.
Yes.
And it's like, it's us wanting to like have ultimate control, kind of be little baby gods, where it's like, no, that ain't how it works.
Right.
And it's just continuing. We were having a couple couples came over that we don't get to see often. One moved back local again. They're just lovely people, and everybody sharing family tragedy in a way that was healthy and cathartic and caring. Oh, it was just wonderful. But because we don't know why, and why do I do dumb stuff? Why do our kids do dumb stuff? It just, we're broken this side of heaven. And
Right.
so it's going to happen, but just have intimacy with God is just so critical to hope.
Well, one cool story that I'll share with you before we go on to the next album, but a few years ago, in fact, it's more than that now. It's probably about 5 or 6 years ago. In my pastoral ministry, I had gone through a difficult season and was really having a hard time of dropping the weight of some hard things I had gone through, and was just carrying it around with me. And so like that, going back to that line, I'm walking wounded, was a very real thing for me in my life. And I remember just praying to God, like, I can't go on like this. Like, if I'm going to continue on in ministry, I have to somehow help me
Remedy it somehow.
because we have a Bible college we support at the church here at New Hope. It's called New Hope Bible College. It's in the southern portion of India. And every year they do a graduation ceremony. They train young men to become pastors, and then they go out and plant churches all across India. It's amazing ministry. And in February of each year, they invite me to come out, do a commencement speech at the Bible college. Well, this particular year where I was feeling down and I don't know what to do, I go fly across the world. And I'm sitting on one of these services, and they would have a service every day, and these services last 3 hours to 4 hours long. You want to talk about a difference between what we're conditioned in America for worship as opposed to going there. And they do communion in one of the services, and communion lasts an hour in itself. And I'm just sitting there, and it's about 100 degrees. We're under a tent. And they're all dressed to the nines. and I'm taking communion, and I feel like, God, how did you call me to, how in the world am I here? And then it was after that service, we went and took a drive. They wanted to show me some of the sights, and take me to places. So they take me up in this car into the mountains. And there's these tea fields that is the most beautiful greenery that you could ever see. It's the most picturesque. And we pull over on the side of the road to get like a snack. And I look over, and over the mountains, the sun is peeking out over the mountains. And you're going to laugh. This is going to sound like a movie. Michael W. Smith had just come out with his worship album, Surrounded. And there's a song on there called Light to You. And it goes, even my darkness is light to you. It's based on scripture. And that was playing in the car as I'm looking out at this. And if I were to pull back Montana, it was God's way of going, I'm here. And for me, just so you know, I'll show you, when the podcast is over, I took up my phone and I tried to take a picture of what I saw. And I'll show you when this is over, and you'll go, oh my goodness. Like so it's in my office hanging right now because it's always a reminder that God says, like, hey, even when that next season comes, I'm here.
When it's really, really bad for someone, and maybe they've never had that. They've never had a revelation of Him when those really bad stuff's happening, and they're like, whatever, what it's no, and He just doesn't like me, or He's not there, or He's not listening, or it's so hard sometimes to turn that around to say, I'm not with him right now. I'm not listening. I'm not looking, because we go some inward way with our pain and just like, and I'm a believer in the screw tape letters. And like
spiritual
Satan
warfare.
Yes. It just, we and it's not, doesn't have to be the big demon, whatever. It's just a little nudge, stay sad, stay,
Right.
Hurt, stay here, wallow, don't get anywhere good. Just the little subtle shoves, as opposed to, all the, what appears overt. It's so subtle, the little subdemon dudes doing their little
Right.
They want us to be distracted,
Right.
and they don't want us to have hope, but they can't. Oops, sorry,
Yeah.
my bad.
You're an important man.
No, that was an alarm, and a daily alarm.
Well, no,
It's not vital.
But to go along with your point, I mean, when Scripture tells us that the devil is like a lion seeking for someone to devour, how do lions get their prey? They try to separate you from the herd,
Yeah.
and make you feel like you need to isolate and go along. And that's a big thing in our culture these days, of more and more people thinking, well, I'm going to isolate and stay away.
And even in the bigger vision of community, of people going to church online and not going into the fellowship. And because people will want to say, people irritate me, or it's like, well, you're a people too, aren't you? And so did God call us to isolation? Is that what he called? He called us to working out our faith and doing it. There's dumbheads at every church, and you're one of them, and
Right.
let's work out. That's what our lives are supposed to be.
Right.
And if you like kind of cherry pick your, and I don't know if I want to go there because that music's not quite my thing, or these people look too old, or these people look too young, or the consumerism of church is just grotesque to me. And I'm saying that as an imperfect human.
Sure.
But it's like, I've been at the same church since we started, about 20, 30 of us back in 85 or 6. Not because it's, and it hovers in the clouds and no, because there's been dumb times
Right.
and great and wonderful and everything. It is like, I am committed until they go off the rails theologically. I am committed to being there.
Right.
And that it's just, I don't know.
Well, a
It's
good
like,
rule, it's not a good rule of thumb. Good is not the right word, but if you said you've been at that same church since 85 or 86, so
Yeah.
you've seen some stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Because
Crazy stuff.
every 10 years or so in the life of a church, it's going to go through.
Something's gonna happen.
Something's going to happen.
Yeah.
Just like in your family.
Yep.
Just like with your friends.
just like in a band.
And are you just like in a band?
Yep.
And God calls us to stick it out. And I think you're right. When theologically is when you go, hey, if I'm not on the same page,
Yeah.
that's a different thing. But when we get into disagreements with people in regard to relationship, you got to work through some things.
Finding that and talking, and we eye roll, and but it is forgiveness, asking for it, or hoping to get it, or
Right.
but finding ways to communicate in ways that are healthy, and and at my age, I'm 61 years old, and I'm still figuring out like how to do that in a healthy way. And I've been a people pleaser most of my life, and I still have some of that in me, and but I'm not as bad as I used to be. And in a band too, people treat you way better than you deserve. I've said even in a few interviews back in the day that I could be a mass murderer, and half of our fans would find some way to say, well, it was probably when he was young, and it was not really, almost like say it wasn't your fault.
Right. I would agree, because you were the lead singer, man. You're the guy.
Well, that's the thing, is like, you just you better not like own that stuff. You better take that, they mean well, but you better realize when you get on the tour bus and then all the idiots are back together again, it's like we pretty much were fairly good at knowing that we're all just dumbheads, and God's gracious, and iron sharpening iron, or
So So since I brought up that whole lead singer thing, I'm going to go now. So if we jump ahead to the next album, that was Freedom, that Whiteheart came out with in 1989, which many of the Whiteheart fans, I shouldn't say many, a good
Most.
portion would say, hey, that became an album that really brought the band into the limelight in their world. So many good things were brought into that, from a musicianship, from just the singing, the lyrics, all the things that came together. The producer, Brown Bannister, on that album. Is there a song on that album that when you look back on it that just stands out? Or maybe even when it came to like the live performance of it, when you sang it?
You know the songs better than I do. I had too many, and I don't remember which songs are on which album most of the time. Gordon and Gersh are like t, and I'm just like so. Was Over Me on that album?
Over Me.
Okay.
Yeah.
As Gersh and Gordon would both probably say, if there was a worshipful song that we ever did, that there's something about that song that hits us. And even after the band was over, like if there was a song that Gordon, Gersh, and I, just the three of us did at church here and there through the years, that's the one we did more than any.
Well, if I were to do a Gordon Kennedy impression right now, because he was on the podcast not too long ago, and he said, the one that got me the most was Over Me, because it would bring Ricke to tears. That's what he said. Now, you said you cry about everything.
Yeah, I do.
Why did it bring you to tears?
I just think the tears part is like most people wouldn't cry even if you had the same emotion. I will cry when people have the exact same, if there was a way to measure what that emotion is and how much of it. Like others would like feel that too, but they don't cry. I just end up freaking crying. It ticks me off. So it is. I don't know.
It is appropriate that it started raining at this point, by the way. It's raining outside, and we're talking about Caught in a Summer Rain. Melodically, there's songs like, and I don't think this one's on, I think it was on Powerhouse, but what's Unchained? There's certain, Tales of
when
Wonder.
I first started listening to music back in senior year in high school, the very first time, I didn't realize that what was attacking me was melody. So that's why, while I think rap has a valid place in the world of music, it's not for me, because I was so, especially at my infancy of music, was melody, like that you could just play a guitar or piano and sing that song and that it holds together. It wasn't crafted with all kinds of other stuff. Those things matter, and I think an Over Me can do that, or an Unchained did it for me when I hear what it was, though that has more stacked BGV-ish stuff with it. But Sing Your Freedom, that was a fun, things that made me dance, because that one definitely did. Independence Day was from Powerhouse. But Sing Your Freedom probably from that was on
Freedom.
It was on Freedom.
It was appropriately on the album Freedom. Sing Your Freedom.
Oh, there you go. Thank you.
Yes. So what was it? Was it the music that made you dance? Was there something about the
music?
Message
usually,
that it was
again,
making you?
Melody. It was usually melody.
Yeah. How much caffeine did it take for you to do a show? Because you look like you were on about
I can drink a caffeine and go to bed. It doesn't matter. My wife can't drink it after like 10 o'clock, and she has problems sleeping at night. 10 in the morning, I mean.
So my sons are sitting over here watching this whole podcast.
Yeah.
And so when Ricke would do these concerts, if you were to capture a ball of energy and unleash it on stage, that was you from the word go.
Mark, the runner, before shows during the day or whatever, said I probably ran 2 to 3 miles a night on stage.
And it had backflips in there.
It started from the fact that I was scared when I first started singing. I didn't want people to see me, and I think subliminally I thought somehow I could outrun their view. Like, if I move fast enough, they won't see me, and it'll be okay. And so But, you know, again, I was a hyper kid anyway, and now later being ADHD, whatever, I always like to say in the 5 percentile that meds don't do anything for you. And it made me want to, you know, rock. It made, you know, so for me, it was like, how do you not move? Like even at church on Sunday, people laugh, because I've been going there forever, like people laugh because my oldest, when he would be, and actually I think all the boys, Hunter especially, will lead worship summit in Florida where he lives with his wife. My leg does this move thing if I'm standing. If I'm standing, I can't sing without it, because if I have, my leg's moving, I gave up years ago, not moving my leg. So my son would do the same thing when we're singing worship together or something, and the legs moving at the same time. So it was just, I'm hyper.
Yeah, if I were to visualize you performing live, that leg movement, I can see that. Yeah,
it would do it in its own different way, but
it's
sometimes
this knee,
if I was it's my right knee does this, you know, and that's the one that has had a meniscoscope since, you know, about like 5-7 years ago. But that was probably jumping from the speakers down. I probably hit my meniscus a bit too hard through the years.
It's not the age; it's the mileage. Is that the Indiana Jones line right there?
My father-in-law, retired pastor, said he didn't make good choices growing up, and that's why he's having health issues now. But, you know, he has no idea body-wise. Well, he did other body things. I just did physical body things.
Well, you started, you know, we were talking, this Over Me is what started off this whole conversation, singing that song, and, you know, on the Freedom album. So you said Over Me, and then we started
other ones or
we started
whatever.
jumping around on what, you know what's funny? I heard you guys talk about the song Eighth Wonder on a podcast recently, where you, Gersh, and Gordon Kennedy were going through all the songs on freedom and kind of giving a little background. This might sound silly, but Eighth Wonder is such a fitting song for this time of people who are struggling with identity, people struggling with how do people see them, all of these things. And I don't know why it never registered in my head that song is all about how God sees us and how much God loves us in the way that he created us.
I'm glad God has the battle and the big picture, because in this kind of in a post-Christian society that we live in my not so humble opinion, that without him, okay, where is your hope? What do you, I got to have money or power or prestige or what is your identity? All of those kind of things, you're just grabbing at things that don't have a foundation it's dependent on how others see you and on things that will just leave you wanting. Eventually, because even at the top, if whatever that means, at the top of some job or some whatever, and God forbid influencer crap. Oh gosh, that just makes me vomit. But it makes me also old and crotchety guy. But it's like
we need that every once in a while.
Yeah, it is like it's never going to be enough.
Yeah.
It's never going to be enough. And, you know, when you think you're there, and then that, even if you are there for years and then it's taken away, you get old, and all these different things where it's scary to me that a culture or society that lives for whatever they can achieve, and that's what they stand on. You know, that's why I think rates of suicide where they are and things like that, because they're looking for hope in places. It's been this way for hundreds of years, but in essence, nowadays you're looking for hope in places where you're not going to find it. It doesn't exist there. And
well, the opening lines to that song. So as you were just talking, I was trying to go back into the lyrics, and I probably would remember them better than you would at this point.
Because I don't listen. Frankly, I don't listen to music hardly at all anymore.
Okay,
so that's important to
note.
Well,
we need to pray for you on that. We got to talk about that on the side. So the opening lines, for those who aren't familiar with the song Eighth Wonder, it starts. Ricke sings, "I've been thinking about me, wondering who I am, trying to be somebody, wondering if I can. I look into the mirror, have this silent fear," and that's where I'm getting lost in. Is there someone really there? I think, is that the line?
Something like that, because I remember it hangs out on
something really there. Yeah. And in the chorus, they say there are 7 wonders of this world. What would the eighth one be?
If I could just love myself the way that God loves me or the Lord loves me, and
and that line.
I understand.
But that line right there, maybe we just hang on that one.
Yeah.
If I could just see myself the way that the Lord loves me.
Because you don't earn it.
Yeah.
You keep fighting to be good enough or smart enough or wealthy enough or cared for. It's just like we're missing him whenever we're going there.
Right.
It's like I don't achieve anything for his care and love of me.
Yeah. And these are the things for me as a young man. I started this whole podcast about me standing outside of a concert ready to go see you guys play. When I would go to church every Sunday, and my parents were worship pastors, and we would sing the worship songs, and we would do spend time in the Word, and that was powerful to me. But then I wanted to have other people in my community where I could work out my salvation, where I could talk through the things that I was going through. And in your band and other bands and songs like that, where I could put on in my car, in my cassette, and sing those lyrics, to go, man, okay, so I have some friends on the other side of this who are sharing wisdom with me. That's not vertical worship, but it's guys who are saying, hey, here's experiences we've had, and here's what we can share with you. So a song like that, Eighth Wonder, for a guy who was just trying to figure out my own path, had a profound effect on me.
You know, saying that was, for whatever reason, making me think of like the Cash Brothers, Ed and Scott, who have a worship music, what is it, We the Kingdom. Just different muso guy relationships that I know of and have. It reminded me, talking to him one day back when we were writing, like when we did Freedom, where we went to a cabin and you go and hash stuff out song-wise. Sometimes the work of creating the songs, you get into the craft of it, which is cool. You're crafting this thing, and that's fine. But whenever it could, and it would happen less than it would happen more, all of a sudden, an hour later, you weren't even talking about the song. You were talking about theological, wonderful parts of what our faith is, that you would like have not a Bible study moment, but just an aha, like, isn't this why we're doing it?
Yeah.
Because sometimes you can get in the work of it and the accomplishing of these, we got to get songs and we got to do all those things. And yet take time to really remember that, we're even doing this stuff because of what our faith is, and how can we encourage each other? And thinking of those people out, because those songs like Eighth Wonder or, was it the lyrics from Desert Rose? Talking to people after shows, after me first coming in and having some of those hard questions come our way after shows, and people sharing hurt from things that have been happening in their lives. And that's frankly when Whiteheart started doing where we had counselors at every show. It was like part of our rider, what the RIDER, that where you'd say, can we have drinks in the green room, and blah, blah, blah. And then local churches that were involved, that they would have people that felt, especially if we could get, like there's so many now, licensed family therapists or things like that, but elders or ladies especially at the church that could talk to kids who were having really bad issues at home or really bad issues at school.
And they need to talk it out. Yeah.
And because we leave after the crew it's midnight, the bus is loaded, the semi's loaded with all the gear. Man, I hope your life turns out okay. And that happens just a couple times before you go, crap, man, we can't. Oh, that makes me sad. you can't just leave them. And sometimes when we were first starting out, we did, because we didn't know what else to do. And we're not like counselors. We don't know. We're just muso guys. And so once we started seeing, like, we'd talk in the bus afterwards, some of the stories that people were being told.
Right.
It's like, we're like, we don't know what to do with that. You know, abuse and and drug addiction and some of these things were like, we're just band dudes, and yeah, I love Jesus, but I don't know what to do with that.
Yeah.
And so, and we had a board of people who were who worked with us that talking through some of that, and then when we get home, talking to our pastors or lay people at church, and like just getting feedback to, like, if we're going to talk about hard stuff from some of these songs, and then people are responding to it, we got to make sure they have some place they can go the next day. Because also we knew the Screw Tape Letters comes to play. The next morning, those people that we were sharing with, the next day is like, that was just an emotional nothingness that happened last night. That's nothing to move on.
Right.
Just
nothing to see here.
Yes, keep moving. And so that, when we started doing that, we just saw more purpose in the live show, if you will, of what needed to be a part of it.
Yeah. And you mentioned Desert Rose in that. Desert Rose came on the next album after Freedom, an album called Powerhouse that I actually started talking about at the beginning of the podcast. So I will say, I mean, Powerhouse, since it was the first cassette that I actually purchased with my own money.
You just said cassette. Do you know what that is? Oh.
No, these guys don't know what it is, but it's the first cassette I purchased with my own money, went into the Christian bookstore, got it.
That's awesome.
I mean, I have a whole lot of questions about the cover of that album and why the bowling thing. But anyway, my favorite song on that, listen, I'll be honest, I want to talk about Desert Rose. Independence Day is my favorite song. I mean, it was the first one I saw live.
That was one of my favorite dance songs for sure.
Yeah.
Like, if you ever saw the video, we were down at Union Station back before they, got rid of some of the train depot stuff, and that's where we shot that in Nashville.
I'm glad you told me that, because I'm such a weirdo that when I drive to Chattanooga, there's a big warehouse, and I used to always think, I wonder if that's where they recorded the Independence Day.
No, if you got Union Station, you just go, what would that be, the south side of Union Station? They used to have an escalator down, I don't know why, because it went to nowhere. I don't know what was down there 50 to 100 years ago, but it was just like a dusty place that wasn't developed at the time, and now there's like, a dozen towers around that wasn't there at the time. But I love that song. Was a fun one live.
Yeah, such a good one. That's my first live memory of a rock concert, and so and I think you had that sweet Army jacket. I don't know what that was, but anyway,
it was just vintage thing that you grab at a vintage clothing store.
Yeah, it was pretty sweet. But lyrically, Desert Rose was one. We kind of talked about that, where it's, to me, the song was about living out your faith, trying to be holy in a time where a lot of unholiness was going on, and how alone you can feel in that.
When you feel like God calls you to some form of holiness, or a different, like, there's going to be something different about you when you walk into that faith, and it's not popular, and even honestly more not popular now.
Right.
And especially even the church kind of does a little bit of a meh when it comes to holiness sometimes, and because I don't know. Our pastor would sometimes call that maybe a form of greasy grace. Like, but I'm cool,
Yeah.
We're covered. We're covered. You can take, Reformed theology too far and, taking it. Now, come on. Like, what is the purpose? Is it for me again? Is that like, am I turning it down to create some thing that allows me to do whatever I want to do?
Right.
And it's like, no, that's not the purpose of grace, and anyway.
Yeah. I've heard you talk about Desert Rose on a few other podcasts and different things, even some lyrics you said, I was kind of on the fence about. And you were telling me off camera about some even things that came from that song that not many people know about, opportunities that came.
That's right. Yeah, that was so. People think that our lives were lucrative, and it wasn't. But that's fine. So when I'd get in off the road, I still needed to try to make income some way, and so I joined SAG, which like they call it Screen Actors Guild, but so you could do video, TV stuff, but audio things as well, and was it AFTRA? Was that another union? Because the town was union. It's a union town vocally as well. And so I wasn't nothing I was fighting. And so if I can get anything. So I made a cassette back in the day of you only put about 30 seconds, 45 seconds worth, like maybe the verse going into the chorus kind of shows. And you put like about 5 sections. So the tape's only got like 2 or 3 minutes worth of stuff. Because these jingle houses, they call them, works a little differently today, but like the Budweiser Frog dudes were literally just that way not too long ago. A bunch of them were CCM guys, believe that or not. And it was a guy called and said, hey, I got your tape, because what happens, these jingle houses who do, they'll do McDonald's, Budweiser, whatever, they're doing, sell cars. When they get the gig to get the song, they get a song that the corporation likes, and then they got to make it.
Yeah.
And so these jingle houses will have in-house guys usually that are good enough to do them, because you get paid better if you do your own stuff. But every once in a while they go, we need somebody outside. And so the AFTRA would, well, here's a bunch of cassettes. So they'd start listening to some. And the one guy, when I got a McDonald's breakfast commercial that I got to sing, he said it was the Desert Rose. When I heard that Desert Rose song, it's like, I wanted you're doing it.
Yeah.
And I did. And so, yeah, that song, paid some bills for a couple years, which I was thankful.
You're not the ba-da-ba-ba-ba. You're not
No,
that guy.
I was, have you had your break today? That was the...
Yeah?
Yeah. Oh,
All
and
right.
it's so silly because I probably sang in the studio for a total of an hour, did like a couple 30-second spots, maybe a minute spot or something, and there's voiceover, yeah, scrambled eggs and blah, blah, blah. And then you're singing in like literally one line, And so I was just saying, I got that somewhere in my attic. I need to go pull that down and like throw it on the GRG site or something, just from an audio standpoint for just fun.
Yeah. Well, I know you just sold us on it, because we're ready to go. We're ready to go get
ready
some
to go
McDonald's.
get some McDonald's.
Make that happen.
I did a BP oil one too. That was... just didn't last as long, unfortunately. But that was a little tidbit that helped me.
So let's jump ahead, because we only got a few minutes left, and I'm spending more time on these other albums. But the thing that after Powerhouse was Tales of Wonder. Mm-hmm. You mentioned Unchained earlier, and the one thing I'll say about Unchained. Okay, so this is where, just from a spiritual perspective, I'm going to ask you this question.
Yeah.
Has anyone told you before? God has his anointing upon people, right? And we talked about your singing voice and things like that in the beginning of the podcast. Did anyone ever just tell you that your voice, you have an anointing when you start singing, that God just is kind of working through your voice? They
have, yes, literally they have numerous times. And I think because I grew up in not a dead church, but just not spiritually, stuff was never touched upon. Mm-hmm. And so even in college, there was more of an understanding, hello, Trinity, that's quite, integral to the whole experience. And yet, and even in the, Presbyterian church that I've been going to forever, there are times where, and we've had some emphasis in the last couple quarters on it. It's like, kind of, hello, please, and but so anything that could have this like earmark of potential, ooh, that's starting to sound like charismatic or something like that, can scare Reformed people.
Sure.
And so when I would hear that, I kind of understood, but there's also this part of me that I've never really dug into that in a way that would probably be good for me.
Yeah. Well, the one thing, just from I've had a few conversations with you over the years, and you've always been one who's humble about that. You've never been one to say, "Hey, listen to my voice. It's anointed." And
if you ever tied those two, that would be. Yeah.
But what I'm specifically talking about in the song Unchained, and I could go down a list of these songs, but especially when you get to the end of Unchained, and you really go up into the high register, my heart, there's no better time than now to start, and it's way higher than what I'm just doing right now. That's where songs like Independence Day, Desert Rose, or all those, when your voice would go up into that high register, there is a free... God is speaking through your voice in that. And I think that's what it is, where I've found even in ministry over the years as a pastor, when people would say things like that to me, well, the Holy Spirit was moving in that, or where, and you have a difficult time going, hey, I'm just a guy.
Me.
But then over time I've realized, but I'm a guy that the Lord is blessed enough to use me in that.
It is, that you shouldn't, I shouldn't dismiss it. I shouldn't go, then I'm awesome, because that would have nothing to do with me anyway. And sometimes it's like, is it, me that's anointed the sound of my voice at that moment in combination with some lyric, or just God happening to be there extra or something, which I don't know that that's scriptural, theologically sound, but some moment where there's a convergence of, because we do have some, at least I do, and I know others who have, these kind of little more wow moments that it's like, if the Spirit is, as it suggests, like the wind, there are times where the wind blows harder and it doesn't. I don't know how much that analogy holds spiritually, but it does a little for me that it can feel that way. Because even when I'm out in my backyard with the trees and the, sometimes just a quiet joy of just like, this is all for me, and I even think in a way that this is all for me. Not that it's not for others, but it's just me and him, that he was so nice doing this. Because there's days where I don't sense that as strongly, but I do it when I'm showing properties, walking in the woods in the fall. One of my favorite things in real estate to do is when I'm showing like hunting property or just large tracts, and the weeds are all down, the ticks are dead, and I'm crackling through a forest. It's just, I love it.
Yeah.
I'll do that for hours and don't think I'm working.
It brings that to mind on that. And just briefly, there's a Christian artist, Andrew Peterson, who's written.
He is insanely wonderful.
Yeah. He's written a book called The God of Garden that I'm reading right now. He talks all about that. One of his loves in life is to just go and explore out into the creation and wilderness. And the book is all about his explorations and all that. So what you're talking about, I highly recommend reading it.
Like hitting Radnor Lake and catching the bald eagle nest on the other side of the lake, and I love it.
Yeah, so he talks about that. But just to kind of finish this thought, as a pastor, one of the things that kind of weirded me out, and I didn't really know how to process it, were the times when I would show up into a situation, whether it be a time in the hospital with a family, at a funeral home, in a counseling session, or whatever it may be, and my presence there, my attendance, brought peace to a family. And I didn't know what to do with that, because I thought, I'm just a guy. Hey, I'm just a guy, And over time, the Lord has really worked in my life to see, yeah, you are just a guy. Mm-hmm. But I've ordained you to be in that position to represent me. And so like for you, like that's how I like when I would hear your voice and I talk about that, it's like say, so it was never a Rikk Florian thing.
No.
But at the same time, God ordained you for that moment, Yeah. And I've told you off camera this before. Here I sit as a guy who really can look back to the roots of ministry in my life and go, hey man, you were a part of that. Mm-hmm. And so that say when God had his anointing on your voice, it was like, man, it was so much bigger than you had any idea. Mm-hmm. And I even see that in ministry now. Sometimes when things happen, it's like, man, God is doing so much bigger things than I have any idea about,
Mm-hmm.
And so, man.
I was speaking of podcasts. I was listening to the incredibly long The Rise and Fall of Mars Hill.
Oh, yeah.
For whatever anybody's take on that might be. But and then you mentioning visiting people in the hospital. Gordon and I have several times gone to sing for someone who's dying. Mm-hmm. And dang it, come on. And he had, once when we were walking out, he just said, this is what we're supposed to do. Mm-hmm. You pass in front of hundreds of people or more, and, I've sung in front of thousands or tens of thousands before, but that is, to this day, my father-in-law, just like Gordon is just shy of Jesus, because when my mom-in-law passed away the day we were at the hospital, and asked Lisa, my wife, wanted Gordon to see if he would come, because we knew he sings for people who are dying. Mm-hmm. And it's not because, he astoundingly performs his whatever, but there's a heart thing in just going in for him, for everybody there in different ways. Everybody's got their own way that but sometimes somebody in another room we don't know with somebody, and so that kind of stuff is that's I remember I first came to town that Michael Card, who is a early fella in the music biz and Christian music,
deep theological stuff.
Yes, and when these people out there would go like, I want to do music just like you're doing, God, and some would say, God has this for me. I'm going to do this. This is going to be, and I think Michael's take on it I thought was so concise and great. It was like, if God wants you to play music, play it. Whether that's for 10 people in your youth group or 20,000 people at Bridgestone, mm-hmm. just like do it. He's going to work out whatever in that's going to be. It's not failure if you're playing for the 10 people in your youth group or for 400 in your you just do that art that you feel he called you to, do it. And whatever opportunities show up, you do that.
Yeah.
And so that's why numbers don't matter, though I know challenges can be for the financial health of churches, like, all those kind of challenges that come. And that's why in listening to that Mars Hill thing, it's like, holy cow, there's so much to learn in that. Oh my gosh. And it's like, you can't follow a dude.
Yeah.
You don't follow a dude, follow Jesus, and then commune at church with and encourage each other, worship together and do life together. But,
Yeah, it's such a cautionary tale for sure about how things can go off the rail quickly.
Yeah.
If too much emphasis is put on ourselves, individuals.
It's dangerous,
Definitely, for sure. So one last song to talk about, because we're out of time here.
Yeah.
You've been generous enough to hang with me long enough. So on an album you guys did toward the end of the Whiteheart career is Inside. And there's a song on Inside that's called Inside.
Yes.
Now, you got to unpack this for me, because you're involved. You have a writing credit on this. So you said you weren't involved too much writing, but
That was the one that I wrote the most of, I believe. And Mark could could maybe
okay.
say that, because I can't. Mark remembers better than I.
So
but
you
that one? Yeah, that one. Seeing that'll make me possibly bawl again. But that was relationally, it was the worst time in my life. I had my first wife had left, and
how long had you been married?
like 7 years, 3 kids. It was busy. I'm on the road a lot and all that kind of stuff. So I'm not prepared for that paradigm. So I don't have, my parents stayed together, their whole lives. So I didn't know I never saw that coming. And there was enough dumb guy in me that totally sees I should have seen it coming, but I'm juvenile enough that I didn't. And, kind of for her, it was too late. And so working out how to, I don't know how to live on Mars.
Yeah.
I've never been a Martian, and so I don't know how to live here. And so that's where that song came from. And that's also why it was so dark. And what's so hilarious is it's like the only song we were nominated for a Grammy
Nice.
ever. And so it was like, there's a part, though that maybe doesn't.
Was there an
tell the
element
tale.
of it? Because the opening lines of that song where you go, hey, Mr. Nice Guy, I don't know your name. Were you talking to yourself? Like, here you're our lead singer, you're fronting this band, and everyone sees you're a nice guy, you got a smile on your face. Was it like, this is, I am struggling with
here's
this?
the, like you say, when I was saying either on or off camera that, like, people treat you better than you deserve. As when you're a recording artist and, hundreds or thousands or whatever come to see your shows. And so, like, oh, he's awesome. Because that's the 2 hours you saw of me.
Yeah.
And so, like, I'm not some horrible guy, I don't think, right? But we've all done enough that hung Jesus where he went. And
we all have that person we are when the light is not on.
Sure. And, one like I was like I say, mass murderer or anything, but it's like.
But we're definitely not the idealized version that you're seeing up there on the platform.
And there was enough, and I through years of counseling and things like that, of finding out what a unaware, understanding, and even my present wife, we've been married over 25 years, and like, how do you attend to your spouse, when it's easy and when it's not easy, and all those. But I'll tell you, just wanting to be with one another, and it brings you joy. It's like that. As I get older and stuff, I know, like, I just want to hang with her. Like, I want to hang with her and be with her.
Yeah.
And we don't have to, like, do anything special. Just, I want to be with her. And there's something, we're doing something right when that's the way it is.
Yeah.
And she wants to be with me. And so that song was just like kind of a scream of just like hurt and sadness, confusion. Know you're there, and I'm seeing you some, but there's a lot heavier cloud than normal hanging around. And I just hadn't had that pain before. I hadn't had hurt, hadn't had challenge really. And so when that hit, that's where that song came from. And so it was kind of a cathartic thing, but it was really a cathartic thing for me, knowing that others would get some of their own out of it. But yeah, that was just me. I always say there was 18 reasons I left music, and I don't even know what they were, but I just know there was 18.
Yeah.
And
had to be some good ones.
One of them was I just some guys I think can craft and do art, like Van Gogh, and can still do it, but it shows up as okay. And I was just tired. I think I was just tired, and I needed to not be on stage when I was hurting. Like the last album, speaking of cassettes, I'll give you a box of 30 for free with, when we were on Curb Records, the last label we're on, and Mark and Billy had written some songs that, I said, like, I think I'm done. And they're writing some stuff, and they played it for me, and you go, you know what? If Mike Curb is okay with not touring it, let's record this. I'll do that, but I'm not going to go on the road anymore. I'm done. Yeah. And Mike said that's cool. Which Mike Curb is so. We had a lot of lovely record label people through the years. Peter York and Daryl Harris and some just lovely people. Yeah. And he was too. Mike Curb was too, a generous guy. And because in essence, that's costing him money. We're going to spend the money, record it, but we won't tour to support the album. Yeah. And so I'm actually thankful he did. There's some really interesting, it's very not normal Whiteheart, in my opinion, stuff, but melodically, again, some wonderful things that I've loved, but nobody heard it. Really.
Well, it definitely, I think going back, you're talking about Redemption.
Yeah, Redemption.
At the end, and that was definitely had the feel of a kind of a swan song. Like, hey, thank you. Yeah. Appreciate the
It was kind of pop and kind of introspective and some unusual, non-accessible stuff, but I'm glad we did it.
Yeah. So you're basically telling me no Rick Florian solo albums are coming out or anything like that?
No. I do like this thing in October, which you're welcome to come to, in our backyard. My wife's birthday's in mid-October. Love you, baby. And we, what do we call it? Guitars and gumbo. My thing is I make gumbo, and it started out as, sweetie, can we just do some cover songs in our backyard for my birthday? Blink, blink, blink. And so we're like, fine, because I don't like going through all the energy of it, frankly, but we enjoy it when we do.
Yeah.
But we set up a stage in our backyard, got a bunch of buddies, we come out, and we just do pop cover stuff. Like we'll do an Eagles song, and we'll do... what do we do? I don't even remember what we do. But we just do some pop stuff. And then it's evolved into a fundraiser to help support people who support their caregivers. Like if you have somebody that has terminal cancer and they have it for a year or two or more, the effort involved when we were watching her mom and her dad try to care for her and us involved and stuff, but it started really with her best friend who died of breast cancer. And when she couldn't work, my wife went to work at her work so she could keep her job. Yeah. And so she could, it's just the care that it can take out of people. So this is just a teeny way of, if we can, put money in the hat and come. You don't have to put money in, but if you would, then we'll pick somebody to give this money to so they can hire somebody for a weekend or two to just get free, rest, get a respite. And so that's a thing we do every October. And so
that's cool.
We'll do that.
That's awesome.
So you can come and,
come check it out.
Come
watch you dance again and everything.
Yeah, well, I don't dance in that one much at all. No, because
gumbo making is hard work, man.
Well,
it'll take.
And
it
actually,
out of
those three friends, I made a little pot because when I make the big pot, it's humongo, and it'll feed like about 120.
Yeah,
some people.
I think I popped into one of those a few years ago, and I like unannounced, and I'm glad I didn't get shooed off the property. But I did, because Gordon.
There's no announcing. Gordon once. What we usually do is we'll have a singer-songwriter go for like half an hour, 45 minutes, and then we'll come on and do about an hour's worth of poppy stuff.
And Gordon's quickly become, like, when I hear he's doing something around town just by himself, I'm like, I'm there.
He's dumb. He's like, good. He's like when he plays at Bluebird, more than the average person. That is my favorite thing to watch Gordon is just him tell his stories and sing a song that he wrote. It's just, he's so good. Well, that's why he's a great songwriter, one of the reasons, but, because musically he's so gifted and remember how he plays and remembers everything. But storytelling, Because Gersh, that's why Gersh was good at it. He's a great songwriter. He's a great storyteller.
Yeah.
Those kind of come hand in hand, and it is so fun to hear. And he's got wacko stories too that are just fun and nutso. I just love it.
Well, I'll tell you what, man. Thank you so much for being on here.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you going down memory lane with me and all that fun stuff. And we didn't get to all the fun years, and you're doing real estate and the things now here living in the Nashville area. And I get to see you every now and then, and you're always generous and willing to reach out and say hello to me, and just. So thank you so much, man.
I'm thankful to be here.
And if God ever puts it on your heart to sing something again, I'm there for it.
Okay.
So there you go, man. All right. Hey, Rikk Florian here. Thanks to him for being on the podcast. Remember to subscribe, follow, check it out, tell your friends about it. All those fun things. And we're going to be here streaming new episodes every Monday. All right. There you go. All right. Have a good one.